Welcome to Firsts in Fiction, your first stop for learning to write fantastic fiction. I am your host, Aaron Gansky, author of The Bargain, the Hand of Adonai series, and Firsts in Fiction.
And I'm Old Man Gansky, the author of numerous books and director of Blue Ridge Mountain Christian Writers Conference. And it's a great topic for us today because I've been working on a proposal all day. So,
is it a modest proposal? Is it a modest proposal?
No, it's more of an extravagant, self-important proposal.
As long as it's not an indecent proposal. Yeah, we're just making all the references today, huh? So
yeah. Well, it depends. They might look at it and go, "Yeah, this is pretty indecent." But
I guess. Yeah, I guess that'll be up to our listeners to decide. But so you've been working on a proposal. What for, if you don't mind me asking?
Well, back when I did 30 events that shaped the church, I fell in love with one of the topics, which was the Scopes trial. And this is the 90th anniversary this week of the Scopes trial, 8 days in July in Dayton, Tennessee. And several movies and a play and some other things have been done about it. And, most of them it's just very bad history. So people are believing the wrong thing about it. But anyway, I wrote a chapter, it's the longest chapter in the book because I liked it so much. And then I got to thinking about other things I wanted to do in the topic. So I was going to self-publish a book on William Jennings Bryant, who was one of the sort of the guest prosecutor. They had more attorneys there so many attorneys, they didn't have chairs for them all on both sides. So that was the first accusation, that the prosecutor stealing all the chairs. But anyway, he was supposed to deliver the summation, and he got outmaneuvered by Clarence Darrow, and so he wasn't able to deliver that, and that's really why he was there. So it ended up being published first in the Chattanooga paper, and then into a book. And in fact, I have the book right here from 1925. Great stuff. But anyway, I thought let's take a look at what he said and why he said it. Because as a public speaker, I've done like 3,000 presentations or something like that. And in doing all that, I have an interest in how things are presented. And he's known as one of the greatest speakers of all time. In fact, it was a speech. This is more than you want to know, but he gave a speech called The Cross of Gold. He was 36 years old, and his party ran him for president. He was the youngest man to run for president. He ended up running 3 times, but it was based on his oration. Well, so I wanted to look at this, and so I started analyzing it, and I thought, I'm just going to make it into a book and self-publish it. And then my agent got wind of it and made a few calls, and then he says, I've got about 5 or 6 publishers that are interested in this. So I've spent the day trying to get my itty-bitty book turned into a proposal. So
well, that's fantastic, though. Now, that'll be a nonfiction proposal, though, which is different than a fiction proposal.
Right. When we get into the proposal portion of the program, we'll talk about the differences between them. They're very similar, but there are marked differences in them. But yeah, this was a nonfiction one. Of course, most of my works are novels, so I did a lot of proposals.
Sure.
Yeah, most of them turned into books, and there's a few still sitting in the drawer that got a big yawn, and that was it.
I've sent out some proposals that always get a little bit of interest, and then it's just a little bit of interest, and people tend to pass on them sometimes. But I think the proposal, and we'll talk about this a little bit later, the proposal is really kind of the first introduction. It's almost like the first date. It's going to catch the publisher's eye. That's the goal. But we're getting a little bit ahead of ourselves. We still got a little bit of business here to wrap up, and so wanted to
let me sneak this in real quick.
Sure.
The most backhanded compliment I ever received was a rejection on a book idea. They said, "This is the best proposal we ever read. We don't want the book."
Gee whiz.
Well, come on.
Hurtful.
Yeah, publish the proposal then. But another publisher picked it up, but I thought that was funny. They loved the proposal, didn't like the idea. So, such is life. I'm sorry, go ahead. I wanted to sneak in a bit of humor.
Yeah, well, a little bit of business before we get started. I want to welcome everybody back to another wonderful week at Firsts in Fiction, and another awesome contest for the First Line Fridays. And this week we've got kind of a special treat in the sense that we have a listener who's submitted numerous times and has not yet won. But this week, that all changes. And so, Jenny Snow, congratulations to you for your current lines, for your work in progress, your first line, where you write, "Change is coming for me. And this time, be it bend or break, I will look it in its eye." So good job with that. What I like about that is change is all. I mean, we start off with some conflict right there, but we also get the resolve of the character. So that was something that kind of stood out to me, is that we get to know a little bit about the resolve of the character, and we get to know a little bit what that conflict is. And change is a pretty broad topic, so we don't know specifically just yet. And we're interested in reading more to find out what kind of change specifically the character is talking about. So what were your thoughts on that, Pops?
Yeah, it's interesting the way she phrases the first portion. It's not that change is coming, it's that change is coming for me. So it implies threat. I'm not exactly sure what the threat is. It might be something, could be divorce, or it could be the end of the world. But change is coming for me. And then there's also some alliteration. I don't know if Jenny intended this. Good job, Jenny Snow. But change is coming, although they both begin with C, though they don't sound the same in their starting. But it's a bit of alliteration there. And then whether it be bend or break. And that gave a nice rhythm to the sentence. And this time I'll look it in the eye. So we learn a lot that there's some kind of danger that's related to change, and she's decided, this character, he decided, we don't know if it's a he or she at this point, this character's decided to go toe-to-toe with it.
Also, and this time, just that little portion there, and this time indicates a repetition, perhaps, that changes. This is not the first time that changes come for this particular character. And so we get this sense of a recurrence, and that perhaps the last few outcomes did not go the way the character had hoped. And so we've got some hinted at failures, some previous failures hinted at here. And so a lot of, just in one simple line, a lot of development of character. We really get a sense of where this character is standing, even though we don't know the character's name. We don't even know the character's gender or age, but we know the psychological makeup, or at least what the character wants us to believe about their psychological makeup in the first line. So well done, Jenny Snow. I'm glad that we could, that you won this week. You've been submitting each week, and I've loved all of your first lines, and I feel bad, when we're not able to select you because there's some other great line, but this was clearly the best line this week. Some other great contributions this week. So for those of you who contributed, thank you, and don't forget to tell your friends, and yeah, so get entered in the chance to win a $15 gift card to your favorite online retailer. So there's that. Thank you, and congratulations, Jenny Snow. And now on to the publishing term of the week, which is STET, and this is something that I'm actually not familiar with, so I'm looking forward to learning a little something today too.
Yeah, STET. It's spelled S-T-E-T. It's derived from a Latin term. It's an editing term that you often see on edited page proofs, especially back in the day when a page proof wasn't called a page proof, was called a galley, which meant it was printed, and then people would go through and make corrections so the typesetter can fix those. STET means let it stand. And sometimes in editing, you'll see people who'll do that, the right LIS, which stands for let it stand. It's the same thing. I mean, someone has suggested a change or wants to make a change, and someone else, could be the editor, often it's the author, who will write in the margin STET, which means leave it alone. So an example of this might be if you're writing something about God, you have to make some decisions about the personal pronouns of deity. Do you capitalize those, or do you leave them in the down style where you don't capitalize that? So I saw God in a dream, and he said to me, well, is he capitalized or is it not capitalized? Well, believe it or not, it varies from publisher to publisher. There is no right or wrong way. One's called up style, one's called down style. Well, if you're one of those people who wants it capitalized and someone's suggesting you don't do that, you can write STET, and that would indicate that you want to keep that capitalized. Or if you don't want it capitalized and they do capitalize it, then you can put STET. And usually you get what you want. In some cases, there are policies in the publishers, like on that topic and other topics, where they, whether or not they're going to use open ellipses or closed ellipses, that sort of thing. That's in-house kind of stuff, so sometimes you can't get that changed. But STET simply means leave it alone, let it stand as is.
Now, I'm curious if there's a relationship between that and SIC, SIC, which you'll often see in brackets when there is some sort of grammatical error or something else in quoted text, and you'll see the little brackets SIC, which essentially means this is how it was originally, and we've preserved that. Do you know if there's a relationship between the two?
No, one stet is usually the author or maybe someone else saying, I don't want you to make this change. SIC is when you're quoting somebody who has often either done something grammatically incorrect or has misspelled something, and you put SIC in brackets, meaning this is the way the original author spelled it, and I have not changed it. And it's just a clue. You see it usually in academic writings. Otherwise, you would just change it and correct the spelling or whatever it might be. But sometimes that's considered unethical to do. And so you put SIC after it. That way the reader knows that that's someone else's choice.
Choice. I like.
Yeah, it's
I like
a choice. Yeah.
To me, SIC always stood for, throw them under the bus. What does the underside of the bus look like? I was having dinner with some friends, and a friend of Naomi's, and Naomi had made some snide comment to her. And I asked her, I said, hey, how's the underside of that bus look? She goes, same as it always does. I thought that was so sad and so telling all at the same time. So, well, excellent. So that's that. I learned something new today, and publishing terms. These are great. These are good. I like those. So thanks for that. Now on to the proposal portion of the cast, and where we talk proposals. So before we get too far into it, let's first kind of define what a proposal is. And Pops, you've done several of these both for fiction and nonfiction. So for our listeners, what would you say? How would you define kind of what a proposal is?
Well, a proposal is a professional document from a writer, and the purpose of the document is to convince an acquisitions editor to show an interest in the book. It's really a sales piece, and it's structured in a way that the editor can quickly look through things, get a feel for the book, sample the writing, and then what happens is if the acquisitions editor likes the book, then they will use the proposal as their sales document when they go to the pub board. I've always liked that phrase, the pub board. It sounds like a bunch of editors going to a bar someplace and hoisting beers and, singing German beer songs or something. Not that kind of publishing board.
I'm actually on the pub board for Brimstone Fiction, and that's exactly what we do. We always meet at the pub and throw back a few beers. This is not true, by the way. I'm making it up, but I've always wished that were the case. I think we'd have more people on the pub board in that case. So,
well, sometimes a few beers will help when you look at proposals.
True, and
I've seen some proposals where a couple of beers would have been nice.
But on the same side, from a writer standpoint, the editor having a few beers before looking at your proposal may not hurt. May not hurt. Kind of put their beer goggles on. I think we've gone a little off the rails here. I apologize.
See if I can get us back on here. So what a proposal is, it's a document that has certain items in it and some sample chapters in it that is meant to win over the acquisitions editor, who can then use the document to win over the pub board so they can get you a contract. So it's a very important document. It requires the utmost of your creativity. I hate them because they're so demanding. I've never enjoyed doing proposals, but I've done, I don't know, 50 of them or something like that. It's part of the business. Preferably, I preferably is what I'm trying to say, that the editor would just call me up and say, here, write a book for us. Really, we don't care what it is, just write it for us. But that doesn't happen. So I have to convince them that this is a worthwhile book. So yeah, I spent a good bit of the day working on a nonfiction proposal. So.
Well, let's just talk real quick. Well, before we get there, because I do want to talk about the differences between fiction proposals and nonfiction. But if I'm a writer and I'm putting together a proposal, my first question would be, who's seeing this? We've already mentioned the editors and the publishing board. Are there other eyes that are going to look over this proposal? Are there other people who want to see this? Or is it strictly just the acquisitions editors?
Well, no, you would use a proposal to win an agent also. See, one of the problems is these people don't want you to send a whole manuscript. So, if you get 500 pages of printed material, they don't want it dropped on their desks. I've been in editors' offices and seen piles and piles and piles of paper, and it just depresses them. They don't want to pick them up. What they want is a quick summary. So I've even gone so far as to using a pitch sheet, which is very short. If the editor says, I like the idea, I'd be happy to look at a proposal. Then I give them the longer document. And then if they like it, they'll ask for the whole book. If it's fiction, you don't have to have the whole book written in nonfiction. But if you're starting off in novel writing, you've not sold many novels yet, then you're going to have to write your first one anyway. But they don't want to see the whole thing. It's too much paper. They're not going to read the whole thing. They need to know whether or not they like it. And so that's what the proposal is for. It's a way of giving them all the information they need so they can start making decisions.
Now, you mentioned a pitch sheet, and I'm glad that you did, because it seems that all the rage now in publishing are one sheets, what I've heard called one sheets, or pitch, as you called it, pitch sheets, especially at conferences. All the writers have them for all their different books. And it's what agents and editors like to see when they sit down and have their kind of face-to-face meetings with them. Just very briefly, what are the differences, obviously, other than length, between, say, a pitch sheet or a one sheet and a full-blown proposal? Yeah,
great question. The idea of a one sheet comes from the public speaking industry. Platform speakers, like Zig Ziglar, when he was around, and others who make their living going from place to place and delivering speeches, will use what's known as a one sheet to get the interest of meeting planners. And it says, this is what I speak about, and here's what people are saying about me, and this is some of the things you need to know. Okay, out of that, writers started using that, because many writers are also speakers. And so that started happening in writers' conferences, when there's what we affectionately call speed dating. You get 10 minutes, 15 minutes, depending on what conference you're at, with an agent or with an editor. And you want to leave something with them, but they are not going to take a proposal, and they're certainly not going to take a manuscript, because they got to get on a plane. And if they talk to 50 of you, you can imagine what a stack of paper that's going to be. So they seldom take anything, especially in the digital age. They'll say, email it to me. But the one sheet, which is primarily a public speaker's tool, has become a pitch sheet, still called a one sheet, that writers are using when they go to writers' conferences. And it tells the agent you're pitching, or the editor you're pitching, your name, who you are, your experience. You got a little bio, and then it pitches your book, whatever it might be. And since we were talking primarily novels in this podcast, first in fiction, therefore it's the novels. It describes maybe a little bit of the characters, what the drama is, and then the statistics, how long it is, if it's first person, third person, those sorts of things. And so what it becomes is a simple brochure. It's just a quick way. And sometimes the editors and agents will take those, because even if they deal with 100 people, 100 pages isn't that thick. They might take that with them on a plane. Usually they'll just say, send it to me, but sometimes they'll take it back to the room so they can think about it more. And a one sheet allows you to do that. It doesn't have all the information. It's really a hook. You just can't get all the information on a one sheet, and you use both sides. They're usually dolled up, and that again comes from the public speaker side, where there's color photo, and some people just go crazy on them, making them absolutely beautiful. And it's very persuasive. It's very persuasive. But then again, you have to have a proposal to continue to sell it. So all you can do is get interest with it.
Yeah, but that's kind of the purpose, though. I mean, it's in online dating, it's the profile picture, right? It's the brief outline of their likes and dislikes. Speed dating, yeah. And I like that you call it a brochure. It's got the most important relevant information, and that's about it. Obviously, on a one sheet, you're not going to have sample chapters as you would in a full-blown proposal. So while we're on this kind of topic, you mentioned a little bit about what the brochure will have, or the pitch sheet, or the one sheet. What does the full-blown proposal have that a one sheet won't? other than just the sample chapters?
Well, there's going to be some carryover. On a one sheet, you normally have your picture. You don't always do that in a proposal. There's some evidence that a picture helps sell things. I don't know if it's true or not, but I often use a photo in my proposals. But it'll have that. It will have your bio. Proposal will have your bio. It has the short summary. A proposal has a short summary. It will have the tagline, and we'll talk a little bit about that. I believe every proposal ought to have a tagline to it that catches the interest of the agent or the editor. It will have that information. Of course, it has your contact information on it also. And then if it's a specialty thing, if you're writing a police procedural and you're a former FBI agent, that always helps to mention. I used to do this for a living. Well, okay, you're a couple steps above now anyone else who's submitting to that, as long as you can write. But you'll get more interest if you have a specialty that you can bring to the book. Not required, but if you have one, that's what you want to list also.
Sure, excellent. And I'm curious about the question that pops up occasionally from writers. Do I go ahead and put together my proposal ahead of time before I'm done with my manuscript, or should I finish up my manuscript and then work on the proposal? Where do you fall on that question?
Well, I was at a stage in my writing where I didn't write unless I had a contract. So I always did mine first. I never finished. I shouldn't say never, but after I did 3 or 4 books, I wouldn't write until I had a contract. It was just, I thought, a waste of my time. And so I always sold books based on proposal. And the proposal would have about 40, 50 sample pages to it. So 2, 3 chapters, depending on how long the chapters are. But normally, especially if you're first starting out, you're going to have to write the entire book first. If you're a heavy outliner, I would, you're going to come up with a synopsis anyway, a short one, usually like a one-liner, and then a 1-page, and then a 2-page synopsis. I would say you could go ahead and do that because you can always go back and change it. But since you're writing it first, I would say write the book first. And the reason is a lot of people start books and they never finish them. So you can save yourself a lot of time that, you get 100 pages into this thing, you decide this is just not for you. You don't like it. You don't want to be a writer anymore. You won't have wasted all that time writing a proposal you'll never use. So I would say do the book first, and then you will have a better idea how to do the proposal.
I agree. I think, like you say, if you're a heavy outliner, you've written books before, you've got a stable of novels under your belt, publishers are comfortable with you, they know you're going to finish a project, then writing a proposal before you write your manuscript is fine. I think that's fine. But again, if you're just starting, publishers want to know that you can finish a project. And so if your manuscript is not finished, they're probably not going to be interested in the project. That's going to be one of the first questions that they'll, how close is the project to being done? One of the things that I include in my proposals is exactly that, how close the project is to being done. Mostly my proposals are for books that have been completed. The last couple I did, one, a novel now, I've gotten some interest from a proposal that I put out there recently. I haven't finished the novel, and this is the first time I've had publishers interested in a novel that I haven't already finished writing, and so now I'm scrambling to try and finish this book. But I also, ironically, the proposal that I sent out for the book that was complete hasn't garnered nearly the same amount of interest as this one. So I don't know what that says, but it's interesting to send 2 of those out. I did send out this last proposal, and I said the manuscript was done, which it is, the first draft. What I didn't bother mentioning was that it needs a complete rewrite from page 1 on to do that. Now, I have gotten a little bit of interest in that one. I can't say it has no interest. There's a little interest, and so I've been trying to work on that one as well, trying to balance some projects here. But what I thought we might do, Pops, I feel like we've kind of covered this. I thought we might throw a couple proposals up on screen, and this will be a little bit tougher for our podcast listeners. You won't be able to see it, but you can always watch us on YouTube when you get to a computer. and we'll kind of narrate as we go. But I thought we might look at just a sample proposal, maybe one of yours or maybe one of mine, maybe one of each. And maybe we can just talk through it. This is how I formatted it. This is why this information is relevant. One thing that I know is very difficult for a lot of writers is to summarize the book that they've written. It's a different kind of writing. It's not just writing fiction. Now you're summarizing a manuscript that you just wrote, trying to condense, 280, 300, 350 pages down into 1.5 or 2. And you feel like, what am I going to miss? Like, what do I have to leave out? It's a tough thing to do. So maybe we can kind of look at a little bit of a snippet of a summary and how you handled that. Do you have one available that you can look at, or do you want me to do one?
Yeah, I have a couple I can try to get up on the screen. But I do want to tell a quick story about what you were talking about, and one of the dangers of going with just the proposal and having accepted. I used to, when I did proposals, always proposed more. So I'd have the one book I wanted to sell, but then I'd have a page of sometimes as many as 12 other ideas. And one time that paid off. And back over here, you can see the cover of A Ship Possessed. Well, all I had for A Ship Possessed was the title and I think 1 or 2 lines. And the only reason it was in my proposal was I had some white space at the bottom of the page, and I didn't like how the page looked. So I just added that. And then I get a call from Zondervan, which is a imprint of Harper Row. And the editor asked me, he said, "Is that book still available?" Well, sure, it's available. Yeah, I think, yeah, it's still available if you're interested in it. He goes, "Great, can you go ahead and send me the proposal?" Well, I didn't have a proposal. All I had was a title and the hook. I had the tagline, and that was it. And I spent 2 or 3 nights staring at the ceiling, trying to figure out what I was going to do. Finally, I pulled it together, a proposal, did a synopsis. They bought it. Yeah, it sounds all well and good. As I began to write it, I realized that the outline I had just stunk. Yeah, it was a stinker. And so I had to go back and change a lot of things. And my editor, I got a note from him when I finally turned it in. He says, it's not nice to fool your editor. And that's the only time I've done that. I should have pulled him in on it early on, but so I was kind of embarrassed by that. But that is the drawback. Sometimes you can sell a book and then find out partway through that it just doesn't have legs at all. All righty. Do you have one you want to put up? You want me to try to put something up?
I'll let you try and put one up real quick, and I'll just tell a quick story while you're getting the screen share all set up. But
trying to remember how to do
that. On the left-hand side, it should be the second app that you have, the green one with the white arrow. You should be able to click on that, and it should give you some options. But
okay, so I need to make this large. Go ahead.
Yeah. The last summer, while my agent contacted me, Dave Fessenden, he listens often, has some books out of his own that you'd be well to look into. He actually has one on, I think it's called From Proposal to From Proposal to Publication, I think. And he has several chapters in there on how to write a good proposal. So I would recommend that book to you. Also his fiction novel, obviously his novel, The Case of the Exploding Speakeasy, which is kind of a Sherlock Holmes, not Sherlock Holmes, but it's I can't remember the name of his character now. That's Watson. Man, now Dave's going to be really disappointed in me. I'm so sorry, Dave. Anyhow, he called me and he asked me, what are you working on right now other than the Hand of Adonai series? And I was like, nothing, just finishing up the Hand of Adonai series. And he's like, what am I trying to sell for you while you're working on that? Oh, well, okay, that if you're going to say it that way, that makes sense. So he had me do a couple proposals, and so I put those 2 proposals together last summer, and he kind of walked me through it, what he wants to see. My former agent had me revise my proposal several times to get him to fit what she wanted, that felt she could sell a little bit better. So a lot of work put into the proposals, a lot of hours. You have one for us?
I think so. I think I have it up. Are you seeing it?
Yes.
All right. I'm trying to make it still a little bigger here, so bear with me, folks. And I can't quite see it. How's that look?
That looks good. It's hard to read, but we can look at the formatting.
All righty. Okay. this was one of the ones I was working on, The Unheard Speech, William Jennings Bryan's Final Message. Now, this is the nonfiction. I'm just bringing that one up to show you a couple things that nonfiction has that novels do not, just so everybody gets a well-rounded understanding of what a proposal does. Now, so what we have is at the very top, you can see the, I would have to do it on this, wouldn't I? You can see the information in the header where it has my name, my phone number. It's got my agent's phone number and contact information. Always want to have that. And then I believe every proposal ought to have a tagline. So I just make it clear. I have my title. It's a proposal by Alton Gansky. There's my agent's name again. And then I have a little tagline. Since this is nonfiction, it's not as flashy. I don't want it all that flashy. And then I set up the front material in which I talk a little bit about the book. This would be very much like the synopsis, not the formal synopsis. But then we get into the key things you should have. Nonfiction, you want to talk about the purpose. It's a little different in fiction, which we'll talk about in a second. The mechanics, you'll get this in both sides. You can use another word than mechanics if you want. It's really the basics of the book. So this is for nonfiction adult reader. This is a tiny book of 40,000 words. So we talk about that. In fiction, I'll show you one where I describe some of the things that are more important to a novel. I talk about readability. You'll always want a topic in the marketplace or a competing titles is another phrase that's used. So here I list all of these books about biographies of William Jennings Bryan and books about the Scopes trial. Table of contents. This is one thing that a nonfiction book proposal always has that a novel proposal does not. And that is the table of contents. And many people get confused on this, Aaron. I've seen proposals for fiction, and it will have all of the chapter titles and descriptions under each chapter. That's really an outline. But they've gotten confused because they've read some book about how to do a proposal. But with nonfiction, and here's the kicker, you don't have to have the book fully written to sell a nonfiction book. If you can prove you can write in 2 or 3 chapters, you have a killer proposal, they may sign you without the full book. For some reason, that's not as big a problem. Then I have some other things here. I have what would be the first chapter, author's forward. And then I start running through my sample pages, talk about the Scopes monkey trial and so on. So all the rest of it are sample pages. And that's the nonfiction one. They will make their decision based on these sample pages and how you present yourself. And it's important that you get it right. You get that proposal as sharp as you can. It needs to be some of your best writing.
Agreed. I'll put one of mine up here. Let's see if I can do that real quick. And I'm curious if I want to do let's see, I've got one for the bargain, which is one that's sold. And then I've got one for the book that I'm currently working on, which is Harrison Sawyer. Do you have a preference? The bargain has sold, and Harrison Sawyer has some interest. Are you seeing my screen okay?
Let me check real quick. I was trying to clear up my screen.
Sure.
And I do. And I would say go with the bargain. Boy, this is a familiar format.
It might. I plagiarized. I borrowed this from a writer friend I know. Some call him Old Man Gansky.
Yeah, Old Man Gansky. Pops.
Old Man Gansky. Yeah, Pops. I call you Pops. You referred to yourself as Old Man Gansky this evening, so I thought I'd run with that. But like you say, I've got up here in the header, I've got my name, the bargain proposal, I've got contact information, novel proposal here. I have kind of my computer is locking up now. A cover page of sorts that has just the relevant information, the bargain, title, byline. Still wants to be in the header. Come out of the header. Now what I have here, I'll just keep going and pretend like this actually looks
Uh,
good. I apologize. This is my
double
wife's computer. Double click.
double click.
There we go. All right. Thank you. This is my wife's computer. It's unfamiliar territory for me. I'll just go ahead and blame her. But what I have here is just a snippet, a little bit more than a tagline, but a quick little paragraph description of what's going on. I even included the theme. I don't really do this anymore for a variety of reasons. The first reason is I don't necessarily write with a particular theme in mind. Some publishers like it, other publishers are not necessarily impressed. This would be a good thing to kind of defer to your agent and let them make the call if they feel like this is something that the book needs in order to sell it. Then maybe that's something you want to do. Otherwise, you can skip it. I've got the one-line plot summary, and then I've got the summary. Which what you'll notice here is I've got the name of the character in all caps, and then I've got about 3 paragraphs about that character and their particular struggle, what it is that they're facing. The reason I did this is because it's a character-driven book, and so the characters are what really sell this. The story is interesting, yes, but it's interesting because these characters kind of bring it to life. Do the same thing with the other characters. And one other thing that you'll notice is Haley, California. I list the setting as a character as well and give a little bit about the history of the town. And finally, I've got the ticking clock. What is it that keeps these things going, that tie these things together, and what is it that they're working toward? You'll notice on the right-hand side, this is something that I picked up from you, Pops, that I really like. It's called the digest, and it just lists very rapidly the important information, the genre, how long it is, because publishers want to know how long a book is going to be, because it depends on, that's going to factor into how many pages it's going to be, how much it's going to cost them to print it, to bind it, etc. The series, if it's a series, or if it's going to be, a trilogy, or if it's going to be have one sequel. You've got the audience. This is a big deal, and I think we did a podcast a few months ago on identifying your audience. Would be worth re-listening to that to identify your specific audience. Point of view, not necessary, but it's nice. Time frame. Some of this is not necessary, but I just kind of included it because it was there and I thought it made it look sharp. Working title to bargain. Often you'll see alternative titles listed here as well. Protagonists, again, not necessary. Backdrop, not necessary. The status here says in process. When I actually started shopping this to publishers, it was completed. So I think I finished this proposal shortly before I finished the actual novel itself. So here, what I would do is I would say complete. Where it says status, I would say novel complete. Or, almost complete. Beyond that, I've got a more thorough synopsis and a little kind of call out here, which again, he's a journalist, so this kind of has a little bit of a newspaper feel to it, which is something that I picked up from you, Pops, so appreciate you putting that together. The thing that gave me the most trouble, and I'm not sure if it's here, I've included the biography, and the first chapter is okay, so it's not here. Let me switch over to my other one, because this is something that's new that causes me all sorts of headaches. Okay, you can see here I've got the digest, the sell sheet. This is kind of like my one sheet where I just get the important information, biographical sketch, synopsis, the market analysis. What does the market look like for this particular novel? And this is what's really tough, because you have to do a lot of research and you have to figure it out. Publishers don't want to publish something if there's no market for it. They need to know who is going to buy this. And so they want you, the author, to do that work now. And really, as much as I hate doing that work, because I have no marketing degree, it's not what I majored in college. I don't know how that kind of stuff works, but who knows this book better than I do? So I should have the best feel of what types of people are going to buy this and what other types of books my readers would also purchase. And so you have to do this market analysis. Competitive analysis is where you get popular books, what their sales numbers look like. Try and don't say that your book is a lot like Harry Potter if it's not like Harry Potter. Don't mention it's like Twilight if it's not like Twilight. Don't just find the book that's selling the most copies right now. Find an actual book that it is close to it. And it shouldn't be that tough, because I'm imagining whatever it is that you're writing, you're also reading. And so I would borrow heavily from what your personal reading stack looks like, especially if you're reading within your genre. Marketing strategies, authors, publishers want to know how you're going to sell your book. How are you going to do some marketing? And so this is where I say a little bit about what type of reach I have, a little bit about my platform. You hear that word a lot, especially when you go to writers' conferences: platform, platform, platform. How are you going to sell this book for us? And so you give them a little bit of information here for that. Chapter 1, etc. You'll see some sample chapters, some sample writing there. And so that's what I had for my sample proposals. Did you have any others?
No, I think that's pretty much it. Well, let me go ahead and share mine real quick then, to push things around here. And I think it's that one.
There we go.
Does that fill the screen pretty good, does it?
It's pretty narrow, pretty small.
Okay.
A little better there.
Okay, well, anyway, yeah, it looks good on my end, and that's really all that matters, isn't it? This was my last major novel called Wounds, and I have a cover page like you do, contact information, including my agent. And if you don't have an agent, just use your own contact information. You'll see that it's similar to what Aaron has, because Aaron was basing his on something that I had been doing for a while. I put my tagline right at the front and put it in bold. Now, normally I don't like to doctor things up too much. But then there's this tagline. First there was one, then two, then more followed. A string of bodies found in bizarre places, each killed in an unusual way, each a life lost, each a clue in a game of mass murder. It's a game they don't want to lose, and theologian Ellis Poe is afraid to face. Then I move into a theme like you had. Now, both of the books we were talking about were meant for the Christian market, and that's why you see a theme. That's something that's rather unique to that. If you're writing for a general market, you don't normally need a theme, because the general market doesn't really work that way. Same as you, one line plot summary. And I also begin with the characters, and here's why I do that, and I've been teaching this for quite a while. People will relate to people, and they will relate to interesting places. So when pitching an idea, whether it's a verbal pitch or whether it's a proposal, it's the people you pitch, the places you pitch, and then the tension. That is what will sell it. If you start with abstract ideas in a novel, you'll lose the agent, you'll lose the editor right from the beginning. So I have Dr. Ellis Poe and Detective Carmen Raimondi. She just still frightens me. Mitchell Finch, the real nutcase in the story. And then I have the thing called a formative event that this particular book had a setup. So I go ahead and put that in there. Now, what I hope you can see there is down in this portion, you'll see that I have dialogue. And what I will often do is I will pull a bit of dialogue out or a bit of action description and put it into the proposal itself to keep interest going. I used to set them apart like pull quotes in a magazine, and then also the ticking clock.
That's very interesting. I've never done that in my summaries. I've never pulled in dialogue. It makes perfect sense why you would say that, and the purpose of that, because again, it's going to give them a little more of a taste of your particular writing style. I've not done that to date, and I think that might be something that I'll pick up and use in the future.
On this portion, see, I even typeset it a little bit differently so that it would stand out. And this is from the book. And my thinking is, in doing this, is that they want to know whether or not you can write fiction. So if all you're doing is writing about the fiction you wrote, but you haven't shown it to them yet, you begin to lose them. And they have so much material to get through that they're probably not going to get to the sample pages, though some editors will do that. They will read the first 2, 3, sometimes first 5 pages of the sample chapters before they'll even look at the rest of the proposal. I know an editor that does that because the editor will tell right from that whether or not you can write. Well, I put portions of it right into the proposal, and it makes the proposal a little more pleasant to read. And then I go ahead and fill in the rest of it. Now, one of the problems we have as writers, those of us that are intuitive writers, is you have to give a synopsis. And they were forever asking me, well, what happens next? And I would say, I don't know. I haven't lived it yet. In this case, I used a chart, which may seem surprising for fiction, but it was very complicated plot. There's a series of murders. There's a series of abductions. And so I wanted them to be able to see that on one page. Of course, you need to have personal information, which we talked about. And then I list all my books. This one's a little older, so I've got a few more books in here. But I list all my fiction, screenplay, the nonfiction, those sorts of things. And early on, I used to do this. I used to even list the stuff I did in business writing. I did a multimedia presentation for advanced disposal, and wrote a script for the city of Barstow, that sort of thing. But that was a carryover from when I was first trying to break in. I was trying to show them that I had some writing chops. Then once you have some books and you're getting some in reviews or you get endorsements, I've started putting those in the proposal also. And that has worked out well for me. And so I list a few books and I list some of the handpicked praise pieces. I don't put any one-star reviews up because I want them to buy it. But, so it is skewed. I assume they can figure that out, because all I have to do is go to Amazon and see some of these. And then one of the things I want to show here is when you do the sample pages, do it in traditional formatting, which is double space. So yeah, it's double space. We've got about 1-inch margins. Very simple and clean. I don't do anything other than the regular Roman type and italics. Seldom do I do anything in bold. I want it as clean as possible. These guys have very tired eyes. Here I'm showing a hiatus break. I want them to know that I know how to do that. And that's what the rest of it is. And so there's a number of pages. So a proposal is going to run, I usually figure it's 8 to 10 pages of front matter. And then I try usually to give about 40 pages of sample writing.
Excellent. Excellent. I think this was beneficial for our listeners. I know it was for me. Picked up some tips and tricks. I hadn't thought about putting in endorsements from previous publications and listing previous publications. That makes perfect sense. And probably should have done that on my last 2 proposals. A little bit of regret.
I want to know if I can enter the first line contest, because that's my first line right there. Flies.
Yeah.
That's it. Okay. I'm leaving this now. So
yeah. You can enter, but as long as you're helping me pick winners, then I feel like there might be a little bit of conflict of interest there.
Well, that Gansky guy, he does a good job.
He does okay. The name Gansky is highly overrated. So, well, if you guys have any questions for us, I know our listenership is a little bit lower tonight because we are recording a day early because of my crazy summer schedule. So if you guys have any questions for us, let me check the room real quick. I'm going to pop over here. Do we have any questions? I don't think we do. We don't.
I don't think we do. I didn't see any. Yeah.
Yeah, we were recording a day early. I'm leaving. I'm heading out of town tomorrow. So those of you who did listen, if you listened live, thank you very much. But if you missed your opportunity to listen to this, send us some comments just on YouTube, or you can contact me on Facebook or on Twitter or at aarongansky.com. I say this every week, so there are ways to get in touch with us, and send us your questions, and we'll shoot back some answers for you. if you have them, if we have them. And so now you guys know how to get in touch with me. Pops, how can they get in touch with you?
Well, through altongansky.com. It's not a real active spot because I'm busy with other things, but you can keep up with the books that I have out, and occasionally I post some things there. So that's really the best place, and just like before. So I am on Facebook. I am on Twitter. I'm on Google Plus, so I do very little on Google Plus. Just not enough Al to go around.
It's not enough Al. I hear that a lot. Actually, from most people I talk to, not enough Al to go around. So, well, we thank you all or too much. Yes, we do thank you guys for listening. Next week, we're starting a bit of a series that we might take us through the next few weeks, called "From the Writer for the Writer." We're going to see how this works out, but we're going to take a look at famous writers and what they had to say about writing and what we can learn from them. So next week we'll have From the Writer for the Writer on Raymond Carver. We'll look at some of his advice that he had for writers, and it's going to be a lot of fun, a lot of really good information. So I hope you'll join us for that. We should be casting again next week on Wednesday. Should be back to our normal schedule, hoping nothing crazy pops up between now and then. But we do thank you all for listening, and until next week, good writing.